A list of the most influential people of all time wouldn't be complete without Sir Isaac Newton. His laws are fundamental to nearly everything we observe in everyday life, helping us understand how cars operate, how baseballs fly, and the movement of nearly all objects. Yet, there was a secret side to this 17th century scientist, which will become evident by the end of this story. By his mid-20s, Newton had already invented calculus, a remarkable feat for the son of an illiterate farmer. Newton never met his father, who died 3 months before his birth on Christmas Day, 1642, in the small English village of Woolsthorpe Manor in Lincolnshire. Born prematurely and so small that he was later told he could fit inside a quart mug, he barely survived. When Newton was 3, his mother remarried and moved to a nearby village with her new husband, leaving Newton behind in the care of his grandparents. This abandonment deeply scarred him. Years later, Newton wrote a list of his sins, recalling a childhood outburst in which he threatened to burn down the house over his mother and stepfather. As a child, Newton was more interested in mechanics than making friends, even carving a sundial at the age of 9. At 12, he enrolled at a local grammar school, and his signature can still be seen on a windowsill of the King's School today. After his stepfather's death, his mother tried to pull him out of school to become a farmer, a prospect he dreaded. Fortunately, the schoolmaster convinced his mother to let him return to class, where he gained the knowledge necessary to enter the University of Cambridge in 1661, paying his way by working as a valet. Although he studied the works of ancient Greek philosophers, Newton questioned their theories, writing in his notebook, "Plato is my friend, Aristotle is my friend, but my best friend is truth." He vowed to uncover the truth through rigorous scientific experimentation. Newton's time as an undergraduate was unremarkable, but extraordinary circumstances soon set the stage for his greatest achievements. Shortly after receiving his bachelor's degree in 1665, the bubonic plague ravaged Europe, claiming the lives of an estimated 1 in 4 people in London. Forced to work from his childhood home for the next 2 years, Newton made some of his most astonishing breakthroughs. Using a prism, he discovered that white light is composed of the colors of the rainbow, challenging the widely held belief that color was a mixture of black and white, as Aristotle had proposed. To prove his theory, Newton built a reflecting telescope that used mirrors instead of lenses, leading to a more accurate image. Far safer than the time he inserted a sewing needle into his eye socket to see if altering his eye shape would change his perception of color. Outside his family home stood an apple tree, the famous apple tree. Legend has it that Newton was sitting beneath this tree when an apple fell on his head, prompting him to ponder gravity, the force that pulls objects downward. While there's no evidence the apple actually hit his head, Newton did ask the question that would unlock our understanding of the universe. Could the same force reach all the way to the moon? He reasoned that the same gravitational pull keeping the moon orbiting Earth could also explain the movement of planets in the solar system. The mathematics of the time wasn't sophisticated enough to determine the motion of these objects, so Newton invented his own form of math, calculus. There was a dispute over who actually invented calculus when German mathematician Gottfried Leibniz published his paper on the subject in 1684. Newton claimed he had developed it 20 years earlier. The problem was that Newton was so secretive he hadn't made his work public, fearing the scrutiny it might attract. When Leibniz appealed to the Royal Society in London, Newton, as its president, used his influence to ensure the society sided with him. Most historians agree that both men independently discovered calculus. In 1667, after the plague subsided, Newton returned to the university as a fellow, continuing his research with a fervor that sometimes made him forget to eat. Just 2 years later, still in his mid-20s, he secured one of the most prestigious academic positions in the world, the Lucasian Professor of Mathematics, later held by Stephen Hawking. Despite his indifference to teaching, his true passion lay in research. In 1687, he published his masterpiece, The Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, commonly known as Principia. This work, one of the most important ever written, laid out his law of universal gravitation and his three laws of motion. The first law describes how an object behaves when no force acts upon it. For instance, a rocket stays still until a force is applied. The second law states that the more mass an object has, the more force is required to move it. A larger rocket needs more fuel to accelerate. The third law states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The engine produces exhaust gases that flow through the rear of the rocket, and in reaction, a thrusting force propels the rocket skyward. Though Newton is celebrated as one of the greatest scientists in history, he actually wrote more on theology. He believed the Bible contained the code to understanding the natural world, and that by carefully studying the holy text, he could predict the future. Newton even predicted the apocalypse would occur in 2060, with the caveat that it might happen later, but he saw no reason for it to happen sooner. He foresaw a period marked by war and catastrophe, followed by the second coming of Christ and the beginning of a new divine era. This religious side of Newton remained largely hidden until 1936, when Sotheby's auctioned off his theological manuscripts. These 7,500 pages, written in Newton's own hand, ended up in the hands of a Jewish scholar before being donated to the State of Israel. Newton also held unorthodox views of Christianity, rejecting the Trinity, the belief in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and he fought against King James II's attempts to Catholicize the universities. This opposition earned him a brief term as a member of Parliament, where he reportedly only spoke once to request that a window be closed. Another lesser-known aspect of Newton's life was his secret 25-year study of alchemy, the pursuit of a method to turn common metals into gold. One of his manuscripts contains a recipe believed to be a step toward creating the mythical philosopher's stone, now popularized in the Harry Potter series. Alchemists believed it could even grant immortality. Unfortunately, Newton may have suffered from mercury poisoning due to his extensive time in the laboratory. Posthumous examinations of his hair revealed high levels of the toxic compound, which scholars believe may explain his mental breakdown in 1693 when he lost his grip on reality. During this crisis, Newton wrote letters accusing his few friends of conspiring against him. He suffered from insomnia and depression for a year and a half. Not long after this, Newton ended his 30-year career at Cambridge. In 1696, he moved to London to help run the Royal Mint. At the time, Britain's finances were in disarray due to the rampant practice of clipping pieces off coins and widespread counterfeiting. Newton applied his scientific precision to improve the accuracy of coin production. As warden and later master of the mint, he also took it upon himself to prosecute counterfeiters, some of whom ended up on the gallows. In his later years, Newton focused on solidifying his reputation, even if it meant erasing his rivals from history. One particularly bitter dispute involved Robert Hooke, a brilliant scientist who claimed he had given Newton the idea that led to his theory of gravity. Newton, as president of the Royal Society, allegedly used his influence to ensure that the only known portrait of Hooke was destroyed. None exists today. Newton ultimately secured the legacy he desired. In 1705, during a royal visit to the University of Cambridge, Queen Anne of England knighted him, making him Sir Isaac Newton, a reclusive man who desperately wanted to be remembered, who immersed himself in his work at the cost of all hobbies, and who never married. He was both a man of science and a man of faith. Newton died in his sleep on March 20th, 1727, and was buried in Westminster Abbey. The Latin inscription on his grave reads, "Here lies that which was mortal of Isaac Newton." Newton's immortal legacy continues to shape our modern world. The English poet Alexander Pope was so moved by Newton's accomplishments that he wrote the famous epitaph, "Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night. God said, 'Let Newton be,' and all was light."